What is going on, everybody? Your host, Chase Selmeyer here with another episode of Chasing Independence. I hope you all are safe and well and healthy. I know it's been a crazy few weeks, to say the least, and we're not even halfway through April. So as this pandemic crosses the country and the world, just prayers and best wishes going out to everybody out there. And for me personally down here in Florida, we've been very lucky that the weather's been nice. So been taking Mac's dog for a walk a couple times a day and just working around the house, in the office, on the website, and try to find new great guests for the show. And one last thing, if you have not had a chance yet to subscribe to the channel, you can do that on iTunes, Spotify. You can also find most recent episodes and some upcoming guests at my marketing website at kangamarketing.com. So head on over there. Really appreciate all the love, followings. If you got a friend or somebody in action sports or business, send this episode to them. Let me know what they think. So as you all know, I typically like to do these interviews in person with our guests, but due to the travel lockdown, that is not an option, so we've moved it online. For today's interview, we talked to Graham Ezzy, a professional windsurfer out of Maui, Hawaii. He spent a life on the water, traveling the world from a young age as a professional windsurfer. Graham is ranked as one of the top 15 best windsurfers in the world and ranked number 1 in the US. He currently sits as a board member of the PWA World Tour, which manages all the World Tour for windsurfing. Graham is also an essential part of a family business, Ezzy Sails, which manufactures and distributes some of the best windsurfing sails all around the world. In addition, in the middle of Graham's crazy windsurfing career, he decided to take off, head to the East Coast, where he attended Princeton University. He studied English and literature with a focus on poetry and is actually a freelance writer to this day. He says the way he writes and the things he can put down on paper has really helped him actually through his action sports career. Graham's knowledge, self-awareness, and world travels have played a huge part in the athlete he has become. This is a great episode for anybody in water sports or windsurfing. So without further ado, we're going to kick it off with another episode of Chasing Independence with Graham Ezzy.
I think you gotta always have respect for the ocean. The ocean's always gonna win. You're never gonna beat the ocean. The ideal is that fear then can be converted into aggression or converted into like pushing yourself to excel, which is definitely a cool process of being able to turn these really negative emotions into something fully positive.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Chasing Independence from Podiums Prosperity. Got a good friend of mine in here today, Graham Ezzy. What is up?
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
Hey, dude, this is weird. We're talking to each other over the digital world, and I was hoping to be in FaceTime with you, like in person, but due to this little travel lockdown, here we are, right?
Yeah, but it seems to be working. It sounds like you're right next to me.
I know, that's cool. Well, this is my first one doing this virtually because after all this kind of stuff hit the fan, I had to figure out how to make these things keep going. So, well, tell us a little bit about where you're at right now and kind of what you've been doing these last few weeks during the corona lockdown.
Yeah, so I'm in Maui, Hawaii, which is my home and where I live for half of the year. And so I was always planning to be here at this time. Came out with my family, with my wife, Katrine, and our son, Eddie, from Germany, where we live the other part of the year. And this is an important place for me to train. I'm a professional windsurfer, and this is one of the best windsurfing locations in the world. But we were planning to go back to Europe beginning of May, get ready for the windsurfing competitive season over there. And that's not going to happen now. So we're stuck here. We're lucky that we can still go to the beaches. We can still get in the water. As long as you're doing exercises, it's allowed. You're not allowed to suntan on the beach, but you can go surfing. So I'm still able to train. I'm still able to get in the water. And I hope that continues to be the case.
So your tour got put on hold, is that right? Or
yeah, I mean, everything got put on hold, you know, the whole world. So the events, all the first events, all the events before July have been either canceled or postponed.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of our guests have, competing or have shows they're going to, and of course it's all been put on hold, and we're all just trying to get through this, and we will. But hey, let's go back quite a bit. Let's go back to young Graham Ezzy days. I kind of want to hear about what your childhood was like, where you grew up, and how that kind of tied into your career as an action sport athlete.
Yeah, so I grew up on Maui in Hawaii, which is a tiny island out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And I had a good childhood. The ocean is such an amazing playground, and I felt really fortunate to have access to that. And my dad was a windsurfer. He moved to Hawaii because of the windsurfing, and so it was easy for me to get into that sport. And it was something that I was good at quickly, and so I had the talent, and so then it was easy to put more and more time in. So as they talk about the 10,000 hours you've got to reach. So it was easy for me to do 2 or 3 hours a day because I loved it so much. And so I was spending so much time on the water, so much time training, that talent turned into real ability. And so when I think I was 14, and there was a World Cup on Maui, and I did the trials, and I didn't make it. I didn't get in, but I was the next spot. So someone dropped out. There was an injury or something else, and so I was in school, and I phoned the school and I said, there's a spot. So if you can get here in the next 2 hours, you can register and compete. And so that's what I did. So my dad came to pick me up, pulled me out of school, went down to the beach. But of course, because I was like the last spot, I had a terrible seed. So I was going up against a guy who was ranked second in the world at the time, Jona Ceballos, Spanish guy. And, I was a 14-year-old kid. I was by far the youngest person competing. Nowadays, it's more common to see teenagers in the World Cups, but at that time, it was not common at all. And it was really my first event. I mean, I'd done other events, but it wasn't like I came from doing a lot of national events or state events. I'd done a few, but the World Cup was really my first real event. And so I just went out and I had so much fun. I was doing moves that I'd never landed before, and it's like it pushed me to a higher level, just having that competitive atmosphere. And I ended up beating a guy. So I beat the guy who was ranked second in the world at the time, and I ended up going through the event, and I had some really good heats. I can't remember exactly where I finished, somewhere in the middle, mid-pack. But I went into it maybe thinking I'd be last. So it was a huge success. And I thought I would go on to have a great competitive career because I seemed to do so well under the pressure of competition, and really my level was rising. And so the next year I went on tour. So I was 15, flew to Europe by myself, and I was with a friend who was like 19 at the time, who was looking after me, who was also competing on the world tour, and we did the events together. But I found the competition to be a lot harder mentally than I expected. So
you're traveling, you're not on your home turf, your home ways, or things like that.
Yeah, so this first competitive experience was so amazing, but then getting into these other events, and suddenly then I would have experiences where I'd choke or I'd get too emotional, and it started. That was the start of my career now, which was 15 years ago, and I've been doing it this whole time. And I've had events where I've done really well, and other events where I've done really poorly, and it's purely been the mental side that's held me back. And so it's been a funny journey. It's been a lot of ups and downs, where after that initial excitement of that first event and thinking that all right, this is great. I'm good at competing, because I knew there were people that weren't, right? I mean, there were amazing talents who weren't that good in the competition because they couldn't keep their head together. And I thought, oh, great, I'm not like that. But then it turned out to be a lot more up and down, a lot more random for me. And it's something that I've really had to work on, is how to get the right mental state to compete.
At that age, at 14 or 15, were you very mentally aware of kind of like the person you were trying to become, or were you just really kind of just thrown into the sport? You had the natural talent, as you said, and then you kind of grew from there. Because it seems like when you show up to a competition, if you, like you said, you're not in the right mindset, at what point did you start trying to develop that mindset of competition mindset versus, I don't want to say free ride, but that feeling you had at 14 years old?
I was aware that that the mental side was important, but I didn't know how to deal with it. And so I think that it took me maybe 10 years or 12 years to really figure out how to get my mental side right. And it wasn't for lack of trying, because I worked with I worked with a sports psychologist to help conquer that mental aspect of competing.
Oh no.
And it didn't work for me at all. And if anything, it made it worse. And I think there's a good reason for that, which is that I think with windsurfing, and this is true of some of these action sports, it can't be too scripted. There's a certain looseness that's really important. And so what works for maybe a rugby player doesn't work for an action sport, where you need to have a little bit of this like free flow improvisation. So if your mind is too rigid, which some of that sports psychology was doing for me, which was great for my confidence and everything else, but I wasn't able to react as well in the heat, in the moments, and that really hurt me.
I stumbled across a video of yours, and you have a voiceover kind of opening it, and you say in there, the navigation, it's like the ebbs and flow, the quick change. You have to feel the rhythm and trust the beat. Like, is that kind of more or less what you're reaching back to? That it can't be scripted. It's the feeling that you have.
Yeah. So I think, like, especially with windsurfing or surfing, where you're riding waves, the waves are just organized chaos, right? So you have no idea what the ocean's going to do. It's these swells that are coming in from storms that are thousands of miles away, and so you can't project onto them. If you're projecting onto the ocean, you're going to lose, because you have to be reading what the ocean is doing and then reacting to that, and you have to have the ability then to understand what the ocean is doing, and then to be able to act out your thoughts. What ended up really helping me in the competition. So I had like a little mantra that I would go over before every heat and before every competition, which is recognizing that win or lose, it's not going to affect my career. No one heat, no one event even is going to make or break my career. Mm-hmm. And so that all this pressure that I'm putting on myself is actually unnecessary, because it's the accumulation of all the events that creates or breaks a career.
Yeah.
So a single event isn't going to make that difference. Second, for the heat, it's not the time to do anything different than what I've been doing, right? I have the skill to win. It's just a matter of doing what I do every day. It's not a matter of trying to go beyond myself, because I think this is a problem that I had, and I see a lot of competitors have in windsurfing and in other sports, where when they're trying to extend themselves in that heat of the moment. They're trying to land that trick that maybe they've only landed once before. And there are some great stories of this happening in heats, but the majority of the time, you just need to be doing what you do every day, and then that's what carries you through. It's the training that's important. You're not going to be, learning a new move in the heat or landing something you've never landed before. You've got to just do what you train. And I think that was a big breakthrough. Realizing that for me was a big breakthrough. It's like, I'm just going out there to do what I do every day, just what I do in the training. And then
so you're creating that mental capacity to just know that this is what I'm doing. You're not filling it up with all these kind of pipe dreams, exactly, possibilities, and
And then for windsurfing, this is true with surfing, which it probably doesn't apply to any other sport, but it's just about wave selection, really. And so it's about choosing the best waves, because that's a huge aspect of these sports, where it's having the ocean knowledge to be on the right wave. And then if you're on the right wave, that will provide you with the most scoring opportunity. And it's the same with surfing or windsurfing. And it's an interesting aspect of the sport. And some people criticize that. They say that, that, what do they say? So they say that it's kind of like a random element that's thrown in, which is why people like wave pools, for example, because then you have it's more standardized. But actually, wave selection is a skill. It's an ability to understand what the ocean's doing and read the ocean, which is kind of a foundation of what surfing is. So it's kind of figuring that out and embracing it was also really important for me.
Yeah. And that just came from time on the water, being around these riders you were with, your dad, who's a big influence, of course. I mean, can we talk maybe about kind of what that was like growing up as a kid in one of the most epic windsurfing places? Because like you said, out the back door, you just have this awesome selection of time on the water and waves and good wind. Like, I mean, I can't imagine a better training ground.
Oh, it was amazing. And I realized that how lucky I was more and more every year that I'm alive. I realize how lucky I was. I mean, it's just so special here in Hawaii. It's warm. We get consistent wind, consistent waves. You know, I see these guys in Europe. You know, I live part-time in Hamburg in Germany. There's a lot of windsurfers there. And they're so much more dedicated to the sport than I am. Yeah. Because in Hawaii, we're so spoiled. You just show up at the beach. You know, it's a whatever 5-10 minute drive, and you can plan your day because you know it's going to be good basically all the time. Whereas if you're a surfer or a windsurfer in Europe or in Germany, it takes over your whole life because you got to be watching all the forecast models. And when there's a storm that's creating waves, it 2-3 days in advance, and you got to drop everything and you drive 2 to 5 hours to get to the spot, wherever that is, in Denmark probably, and then make a weekend out of it. So you got to have maybe a car that you can sleep in. You know, you see a lot of the European surfers, they've got the vans with a bed in the back because it's a necessity because you get off work and jump in your car, you go for a session, sleep there, get the morning session, you drive back and maybe get to work late the next day. But that's how you are a surfer there. And it's a level of commitment that I'm really not used to. I mean, in Hawaii, we're so lazy. I mean, you can go kind of any time in the day because it's good all the time.
Not to mention, I think that also the change in weather temperature and just conditions all around there just would drive me crazy. Yeah. I also read somewhere, I think I found this on your website, but you said, I was lucky that my heroes weren't just figures from magazine, but actual people in my life. The guys who inspired on the water also gave me advice on the beach. What would you say are some of the greatest life lessons maybe you learned growing up on the beach under the wings of like these people you looked up to?
Well, I definitely learned a lot about my sport, and I learned a lot about competing and traveling, and it was a great opportunity for me as a kid. And again, this is something I feel really blessed about, that my heroes embraced me as well. So some of these guys, Levi Cyber, Josh Angulo, Kevin Pritchard, some of these big names and people that I really looked up to, and they were so friendly and open. And I remember being 16 and being called up by some of these guys asking if I want to go train with them or travel with them. And so then I did some of the years on tour, traveling together. And it was a great life lesson because these were my heroes. These were the stars of the sport. And they were so friendly and so down to earth and so approachable and so curious and passionate and happy to share that passion. And that's something that has really stuck with me and something that I'm conscious of every day and trying to live up to and trying to practice and trying to give back now that I'm one of these older guys.
And it doesn't have to be just because you were a kid living on the beach in Hawaii and dad was involved in windsurfing. I mean, I feel like these guys could have been that way to some poor kid from the Midwest who was out there trying to learn, right? I mean, is that kind of what the environment was like out there?
They were, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so much passion, so much love for the sport, and just wanting to share that, So seeing someone coming up and also having a passion for the sport, it created a lot of fraternity, and yeah, it was really great. And I tried now to live with that humility and that openness.
Let's talk a little bit about humility. In your sport, where you guys are kind of in some of the craziest environment on the planet, most unpredictable, like you said, you need to know how to read weather patterns, swells, waves, all that stuff. how do you train and how do you learn? I mean, you say you were a little bit of a natural at the beginning there. Did that continue through your career? Like you would just land tricks, or were there certain ones that stuck in you that you just could never catch? I mean, what's the mindset when it comes to like learning and training?
So the most important thing for training is time on the water. That's the most important thing. It's above anything else, it's having time in waves. There's a quote from one of the great surfers. I can't remember who it was, maybe Kelly Slater or Curran, where he's saying if you want to get good, you got to surf in crappy waves, crappy conditions. And the more time you spend in suboptimal conditions, the more aware you're forced to be about how to create speed, what's happening in the ocean, and it forces you to work on your fundamentals. And so that's really important. And that's something that, my dad didn't really push me at all, but in a few ways he gave me guidance. And one of the things was to always go out when the conditions weren't good, and to stay out. And that really helped me, because it's that training that wins you contests, that wins you heats. But in terms of my talent, so in windsurfing we have a lot of different kinds of conditions that we compete in, and some of them are really radically different from each other. So someone could be the best in the world at one, and then not even able to qualify for an event in the other conditions. It's kind of like riding with your right and your left hand, because the direction of the wind dictates which stance you're riding. So in some places where the wind is coming from the left, then you're forced to ride the waves goofy. If the wind is coming from the right, then you're riding the waves natural stance. And so what that means is that you have to learn both. And so you have to learn how to ride waves and jump. Jumping is an important part of our sport as well. Both stances. And so anyone who's done a board sport before knows how difficult it is to suddenly go switch stance. And so in our sport, you've got to learn both. And then in addition to that, there are huge differences in wind strength and wave size. So in Hawaii, we often have lighter winds with big waves. In Spain, where we have two important World Cups, the waves are often very small and the wind is really strong. And so it's a lot about jumping. And in those places, the wind primarily comes from the left, whereas in Hawaii, it really comes from the right. And so while I had a lot of natural ability in Hawaii that really helped me, I really struggled in those conditions, which are an important part of the World Tour. And it's been a challenge for me and still is a challenge for me. And in those places, I'm fighting to make it in the top 10 at an event, whereas in Hawaii or other places, I'm fighting to win. And it's something that at this point in my career as well, that I've kind of resigned myself to. There's something that just doesn't excite me as much about those conditions. And maybe that has to do with not having the talent, or maybe the talent, who knows which way that goes, whether there's a correlation there or causation there. But the point being is that there are these conditions that have definitely been a struggle for me. And so it's something that I've forced myself to compete in more. So going back to training what you're bad in, training the crappy conditions, that's what I've spent actually the most time in the last 5 years, in trying to improve my ability for those events.
Yeah, I look at some of these pictures I've seen recently of you over the last 5-10 years, and they scare me. I mean, I'll be honest, some of these locations and these videos, I'm like, holy crap. Like, I got a deep respect for the ocean and I spend time in it. I don't have nearly as much time in ocean water as you do, but there's areas, I'd say I'm a fair weather kite surfer, because man, there's just so much can go wrong. Are you scared of the ocean? I mean, what's your relationship, I guess, from a fear standpoint? Does that drive you to perform? Is it fear? Is it something else?
So there's definitely fear there. In terms of the ocean, I think you got to always have respect for the ocean. The ocean's always going to win. You're never going to beat the ocean. So it's really important to go into it with that attitude. And so there's certain rules, you never fight a current. The ocean will always win. The ocean is so strong. And so I definitely come to it with that respect. And then in addition to that, when you're in radical conditions, there's definitely an element of fear of jumping really high or fear of the big waves. And the ideal is that that fear then can be converted into aggression or converted into like pushing yourself to excel. So we've got this big wave on Maui, Jaws or Piahi, and some of my best sessions there where I've really kind of pushed the limits of myself in the sport have been the ones where I've been the most scared in the beginning. And then it's just that fear kind of turns to anger, and then it turns to this expression on the water, which is definitely a cool process of being able to turn these really negative emotions into something fully positive.
So beautiful, yeah. Do you have any memorable moments that something went wrong and you just weren't sure how you're gonna get out of it?
Oh, let me think about that. Memorable moments where I don't know if I have had any moments where I felt like I wasn't going to get out of them. I've had moments where it's definitely been a struggle. I've had broken down a big wave in Hawaii and had to get my gear kind of tied together out in the waves, trying not to lose anything, and then swimming in. But even in those situations, I always feel like, okay, worst case scenario, I just lose all my equipment and I swim in on my board, or I just swim in. I'm a pretty confident swimmer, comfortable swimmer, which is, I think, really important if you're going to do these sports. I think it's really important to work on your swimming. And I recommend to people going to the pool just to work on their swimming, because it helps so much with the confidence and just being able to like really safely do these sports. I've had other situations, like in South Africa once, where I was stuck in a current with some whitewaters, and there was a cliff that I was being washed into. And I really didn't want to get washed into the cliff. And it was like a puzzle. And so there's got to be a way out of this. And I was really struggling, kind of fighting the current, but to not fight the current would be to kind of get pushed into these whitewaters that would push me into the rocks. And there wasn't enough wind that I could get going again. And I was struggling for, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes or something in the water. And it was like a puzzle, and I kind of realized the way that the water was moving and the way the current was moving, that I could, by riding the current a bit and then swimming a little bit to get in another current, and then I could use that current to kind of get around a bit outside of the white water. And so there's still waves coming, but then there was a bit more wind in that place and less current going with the wind. So then there's more apparent wind as well, and then I was able to get out of it. And I think a lot of these situations, it's just so important not to panic. And if you're panicking and then it seems hopeless and like you're not going to get out, but if you keep a level head, it's like a puzzle, and there is a solution for everything.
Control what you can't control and take it step by step, really. Sounds like, I mean, you're working your way through it to get out.
Yeah,
wow.
Keep your head. Make sure, like, be aware of what's going on in terms of the water moving. I think for people getting into ocean sports, it's really important to learn about currents and how currents work, because that can be life or death. I mean, yeah.
So going back to your pro career after 14, 15 through your teens, what would you say one of your most ambitious sports goal was, or something you really wanted to strive for? Yeah.
Yeah, so my goal is I wanted to get a podium in Hawaii, and I wanted a world title. And as my career went on, I achieved the goal of getting a podium in Hawaii, and I realized that I'm not going to get a world title unless the tour changes, and that's okay. There's these places in Spain which are a very important part of the world tour, and I have a lot of respect for the guys that are doing well there. And I train a lot there so that I'm competitive, but I just don't have the passion to really dedicate my life to those locations. Like if I wanted to win a world title, I'd have to move there. I think I'd have to move to Gran Canaria, where we had these events. And while that would definitely help my competitive career and help my world tour ranking, I just don't enjoy that kind of windsurfing as much. I'd rather be in Hawaii doing what I love, riding these big waves rather than being in small waves with strong winds. And that's what I'd rather spend my time doing, and then keep trying to get on the podiums and to win the events in Hawaii and do well enough in the events in the Canary Islands and other European events to keep an okay overall ranking. So right now I'm 15th in the world, and that's okay. So my goals have kind of adjusted with the realities of the situation. And if there are more events on tour that are more like Hawaii, then I would definitely get back into going for a world title, and that would mean working with some more trainers again to help with some of these other locations that are my weak spots.
All right, let's take a quick break. You are halfway through episode 3 with Graham Ezzy. I think one of my biggest takeaways was Graham's ability to be fluid and trust his intuition. You know, whether it's riding a huge wave or in life navigating just daily things. I mean, he's very open to the fact that you can't be too structured. Yes, you have your goals, you have your beginning and your end points, but if you can't be flexible and fluid, what's the point? You know, as Graham says, you have to feel the rhythm and trust the beat. So I hope you guys caught on to that. We're going to catch back in with the second half of this episode of Chasing Independence with Graham Ezzy. So outside of, I guess, windsurfing now, maybe share with us some of your deep passions and things that you're really involved in now from maybe a business standpoint, and also things that you take on for your own soul.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of hats that I'm wearing at the moment. I'm on the management board of the World Tour, so I've been, over the course of my career, very critical of the tour. And a point, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something, I decided that I needed to step up, and instead of just criticizing the tour, I needed to be involved. And so I stood for election to be elected to the management board. I had a whole list of things I wanted to achieve and do and change. And it resonated with the sailors, and so I was elected to the management board. And some of those changes happened, and some of them didn't, because I learned a lot more about the realities of what it takes to put on events and how difficult it is to raise money and how limited resources are in terms of people and money. And it's been really eye-opening being on the management board and seeing what it takes to put on a world tour and how difficult it is. I definitely have a lot more respect for the process.
What are some big challenges maybe you faced, or one, if you can think of it specifically, when you came into that board thinking, again, you know, great, now I can make a difference, and you said like there's a lot more moving parts, I guess it sounds like, than maybe you saw originally, or is there any, something you accomplished in there?
One of the things that I wanted to change was the transparency. So before I was on the management board, it felt very opaque. The sailors, the competitors, didn't really know what was going on. We didn't know what was being discussed. We didn't know why certain decisions were made. And that was something that I was able to change. And I made it so that we had a lot more communication with the competitors, so they knew what was happening behind the closed doors of the management board, and what direction we wanted to take the tour in, and what problems we were working on. And then it also allowed the competitors to have more of a voice in the discussions. And that's something I'm very proud of. On the other side, I want us to get more events in. We've got a lot of good locations that people want to have events. And like I was talking about before, where you've got these like really different sets of conditions that make a huge difference for the competition. And there's always this talk about having a perfectly balanced tour, because right now it's definitely way more weighted towards this like Spanish, European style of condition. And there's a lot of great windsurfers in Japan, in Hawaii, in Northern Europe that are at a disadvantage because the World Tour is so heavily weighted towards this kind of condition, which is onshore, strong wind, port tack conditions. And so the goal is to create a balanced tour. And so that's something that I really wanted to do. But the reality is that we're so bottlenecked in terms of money and personnel that these events are happening because that's where there is the money, that's where the people are motivated to make the events, and to do an event in these other locations, while it would be great, it's just not feasible with the resources that are there.
So how's the industry changed, I guess, since when you entered it to now? Or maybe events in general have changed a lot, or have you seen the different areas of the globe accepting windsurfing more?
Windsurfing's in a weird place as a sport. So it was huge in the 80s and 90s. It was the fastest growing sport in the world. I think 1 in 3 houses in Europe had a windsurfer. Yes, it's always been bigger in Europe than in the U.S., which is kind of surprising. But then it really dropped off in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's been plateaued since then. So we have more events now than in the early 2000s, which is good, but it's still not as good as it was in the heyday in the 80s and early 90s, which is what a lot of people look back to. But one of the changes, because there's a lot less money in it, is there's a lot more of a family feel. So I think the riders are a lot closer to each other. There's a lot more camaraderie. The guys in the sport in the 80s and 90s were making a lot of money. I mean, they're making millions and millions of dollars, and now no one's getting into windsurfing because of the money. So they're only doing it because they love it and they're passionate about the sport, and that creates a really nice vibe for the events.
Let's go back to kind of some of your passions. Maybe I'd love to talk about your writing and kind of, how that's kind of helped navigate you through your career.
So when I was at Princeton, I thought I was going to study math and economics, and I liked those subjects and I was interested in them. But I found that instead of doing my problem sets, I was reading poetry and fiction and trying to write it. And so I switched majors pretty late to English, and I was taking these writing seminars there. And it was something that was really important to me. It was a way for me to express myself and to communicate with people, or communicate ideas that I couldn't formulate otherwise in normal conversation. And so it's been a really important part of my life. And so even though it hasn't been the focus, competition has been the focus, the writing has always been there alongside it. And so how that's expressed has changed over the years. So when I was at Princeton, I was really writing a lot of poetry. That's something I was really into. And since then, I've written almost no poetry, and it's mainly essays. So I've written a lot of narrative essays and essays about my experience traveling and as a windsurfer, as a writer, as someone who's in the ocean. I'm fortunate with the windsurfing to travel a lot, so I'm going to lots of different places: South Africa, Madagascar, Japan, wherever, all over. And that's provided a lot of opportunities to write about as well, which has been something I've been really grateful for. But it's one of those things where the writing is an itch, and once you've written it, the itch is scratched, and I don't really care then what happens to it. It's just,
you can move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I came across I think one of these Italian windsurf magazines. The only thing in English it said, it was an article, I believe, about you, but it called you the gentleman rider. Why do you think they chose that wording? I don't know what it's like in other action sports, but in windsurfing for sure, there's not many guys with an Ivy League education in the sport, and it gets funny. I get funny looks from people about it, and I'm not an elitist at all. I don't have any issues with people that did graduate high school, or I really don't care. It makes no difference. For me, Princeton was really important because I was really interested in studying, and I was so much curiosity coming out of high school, and it was really nice to be with other people who were also so curious, and it was a great experience. But then I went right back into competitive windsurfing. In fact, I didn't even stop. I was still competing while I was at Princeton. But some people find that really confusing. They're like, "What? Why are you windsurfing? What's the point of that?" And was it weird as a Hawaiian boy living his life in board shorts to go all the way to the mainland, not only mainland, but to the East Coast, and go to a school like that? I mean, like Princeton was? I mean, not too many action sport athletes are aspiring to go to Ivy League schools.
It was interesting. So I traveled a lot before I went to Princeton, because I'd been competing on the world tour for 2 or 3 years at that point. And so I'd been already to a lot of places around the world, and lived on my own also for a lot of the time when I was competing and traveling. Not on my own, but I mean, not with my parents. I was 15, 16, 17. And so I felt like I had a lot of worldliness. It wasn't an issue so much meeting all these different people and different kinds of people. But what did really trip me up was a lot of the like East Coast customs. So for example, like clothing. So you brought up like wearing board shorts and stuff. In Hawaii, no one cares what you wear. It doesn't really matter. Like putting jeans, like flip flops and a Aloha shirt is dressed up. And being in Princeton, it was the first place where other people cared what I was wearing. And they were offended maybe if I wasn't wearing a tie, or, if I show up in board shorts somewhere, it's considered an insult. And that the notion of that it was so foreign to me. That was a really big shock, that how I'm dressing matters for other people. Like they actually care. It's not just about a self-expression on my part. It's like, okay, if I show up to this thing and I'm not wearing a tie or a shirt with a collar or a suit, people are going to look at that as being disrespectful. And that was a concept that really blew me away. That was probably the biggest culture shock. Yeah.
That was a totally different change. Yeah. That's wild. And did you ever have a feeling that, I mean, you wanted to have education, you had a thirst for knowledge, so going across to Princeton was no problem for you. But did you ever at any point ever feel that would affect your windsurfing career negatively?
I was worried that might happen, and who knows if I would have had a better career if I hadn't gone. But it was something that was really important to me. And actually, the original plan was to defer my matriculation and to take a year or two to just focus on the tour. And then I met a girl who was also admitted to Princeton, same class. And so I met her, she was European. We met in Europe that summer after I was admitted, and we ended up becoming a couple. And that was the reason that I decided to go instead of deferring, is because I wanted to continue my relationship with her. So it was kind of this like early teenage love that made me go to Princeton instead of putting it off for a couple of years just to focus on the tour.
Would you have any advice for young aspiring athletes who are kind of maybe where you were at your 14, 15-year-old self?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, and this is for athletes as well as anything else. I think it's important to find a mentor or a series of mentors. It doesn't have to be one person. But when you're that age, it can really feel like you know everything, or you know exactly what you need to do, and so you don't want to listen to your parents, which is fine, but there's so much knowledge from other people that can really help you and can really speed up your journey and help your journey. And so finding someone that is in the same passion as you and getting their help, whoever that is, and you might be surprised who's willing to help. Like I had a form of that with all these other pro guys who were my heroes at the time, and it's amazing that they wanted to hang out with like a 15-year-old kid. But I think this is not abnormal. People who are really passionate about something want to share that passion, and they're stoked to see it in other people. And so if you're 15 and you're passionate about whatever it is, snowboarding or physics, really whatever it is, I think it's really important to reach out to other people who are passionate and reach high. I'm not talking about reaching out to the kid in the grade above you. I'm talking about like reaching out to, a snowboard pro or someone else, and find a mentor and follow their advice, because they do have a lot of wisdom, and that can really help your journey. One thing that I think I didn't realize, and I think a lot of teenagers don't realize, is the decisions that you're making at that age have real consequence before you realize they do. So the decisions you're making when you're 14, 15, 16, 17, shape your life in ways that you don't necessarily realize at that time.
Yeah, so you don't have the navigation or the right people in your life, or you're hanging in the wrong circle. I mean, yeah, it's butterfly effect. It's just down the line.
Yeah.
Pull the thread and the whole thing comes undone. So yeah, no, that's great advice. On the flip side, would you have any advice for athletes who maybe are on the tail end of their career and kind of like looking for that next thing? Maybe they're searching for a business to start or a company to get involved with or something to pursue.
I think there's two things I want to say to that. So one is I think you have to start thinking about it before you're ready. So I've seen a lot of athletes do the transition really well and athletes who really struggle. So the athletes who do it really well, they've been setting something up before they're ready to retire. And so they might not even be thinking about retiring, but they know they're in the middle of their career and at some point they want to set something up. So that in windsurfing, there are a lot of different examples of that. So there's one guy, world champion, he's from Brazil. And so he started making these centers, so like the vacation centers for windsurfing vacations in Brazil. And he built a couple of them with his name on them while his name was still huge in the sport because he just won a world title. And he didn't really have to do that much to manage them. You know, he put the money he was making into building the centers, buying the land. And that's a model that really works well. And now that he's retired and that sustains him, and I've seen other pros do the same thing. Another friend of mine, he's still competing, so he hasn't retired yet. He's still doing well. He's still in the top 8 in the world. But he's been getting his commercial pilot's license. And so I think he's doing the program slowly. You know, I think people can maybe do it in 2 years if that's all they're focused on. He's maybe taking 4 years. But the point is that I think he's finished now with it, and so he'll have his commercial pilot's license. And so by the time he's done competing, you know, he's got something he can do, you know, and maybe that is not what he ends up doing, but he at least has a plan B, and I think that's really important for people. And when you're in an industry so deep, you know, like a pro, there end up being a lot of opportunities as well. So it doesn't have to be something so crazy as, you know, getting a pilot's license, which is pretty different, but which that was a passion of his. He's always wanted to fly, so he always flew small planes. So that this is like a pursuit of another passion for him. But, you know, it can also be something in your own industry. So I mean, maybe one of your sponsors or the brands that support you, you know, they're looking for someone to help with their marketing or to help with product design. And, you know, you start doing that while you're still a pro. It's sort of like a part-time gig in addition to your competing in your normal contract. But then that can turn into something full-time, because I think there's no shame in not being able to retire from a sport, you know, and be financially set for life. I think that's in a lot of these sports that are passion driven, that's something very few people are fortunate enough to be able to do. And so you've got to think about that future. You know, you've got to think about, well, okay, what am I going to do in these next years? And I think if you are passionate about your industry and you've got brands that you like, you know, just look for little opportunities with them. You know, it starts small. It starts with, you know, managing the photo shoots or something, and I've seen other guys successfully transition from being pros to then brand managers through that kind of channel.
What are some things that you would say have transitioned that you made from your action sports career into your business career? You know, maybe mentalities or the way you work that have helped you be successful.
For windsurfing, it's so important. Like I said, just the time on the water, just showing up, and I think that's also really important for the business side as well, because so much of it is just putting in the time, just being there, and even if it's something that's completely foreign to you, you know, suddenly you're coming out of your sport. Like for me, getting involved in windsurfing sail manufacturing, having the confidence to know that, okay, even though this is so foreign right now, if I just put in the time, if I look like an idiot for 6 months or whatever, not being afraid to look like a beginner, then I'm going to be an expert. And having the confidence at the beginning to know that that is going to happen, that, as long as you're putting in the time. So I think the biggest mistake that people make, and I've made in the past at different times in my life, is not wanting to look like a beginner, not wanting to look like you don't know what's going on. But actually, learning comes from looking like a beginner. And so you want to be embracing those moments where you're not an expert. And the more you do that, and the quicker you learn, and the better you're doing in whatever you're doing.
All right, man. Well, we're wrapping up now to our final segment of the show. Hope you guys enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun with Graham. I learned a lot about windsurfing and even the industry that I had no clue about, and your passion. I mean, it's just amazing. But I've got this last segment. It's called Last Poll. Typically, we try to get some questions off of Facebook, but recently, with this coronavirus going around, nobody's really paying attention on there. So I had a few questions for you about your time during coronavirus. What are 2 or 3 things that you're doing every day to cope with this world shutdown?
I'm making sure to stay fit. So more actually than before, I'm making sure that I'm keeping to my fitness routine, making sure that I'm doing something every day and really keeping track of it, so that I don't slip up and lose my fitness during this time where the world's kind of off balance. I'm spending a lot of time with my son, Eddie. So I'm here with my wife and my kid, and this is something in general where he has really helped me be more appreciative of some things in life, like spending time with him. Where other things are more fleeting, like winning a competition is great, but then you want to win another one afterwards. It's not a lasting satisfaction. Whereas spending time with him is, I don't need anything else. It's enough in itself. And so, especially now when there's so much uncertainty in the world, and who knows what the world looks like in 6 months or in a year, are we still going to even have events? Is it going to be viable to be a pro windsurfer in a year? And so spending time with him has been really important, sort of keeping me sane and grounded and happy.
Good. Where will the first place you will go after travel opens back up?
I want to take my wife to Japan. I love Japan, and I've been there, 6 or 7 times, and it's such a cool country, and the people are so amazing, and it's great surfing there too. And it's something that I've talked about with her, about doing a trip, and we actually were going to do a trip this year in May to go with the family and visit, and so I could show her the country, which of course is not happening now. And so once travel comes back online, if it comes back online, which I hope it does, I want to take the family to Japan.
Very cool. Anything you're doing currently, like obviously you're working from home, but with your current businesses to kind of push through this time, like are you guys preparing? Are you guys still working? What's going on maybe with the sail manufacturing? So on the sail making side of the business, the factory is closed for precautionary measures because of the coronavirus. You don't want all the workers so close to each other. But what I have been doing is I've been really focusing on trying to get back to the windsurfing community and generating content, primarily through my personal Instagram. So I've been doing live coaching and trying to get back as much as I can. So that's creating instructional videos, or people will send me. I've been trying to get people to send me videos of themselves windsurfing, and then I'll give them a critique on it. I'm doing live critiques and just kind of whatever I can. So I'm kind of shaping this based on the feedback I get. So trying to really read what the community needs right now, and then try and give that to them. There's so many people who are stuck at home, and I just hope that I can give them some good windsurfing content. Yeah, no, I've seen the instructional videos. They're really cool. Was that something that kind of, off a little topic here, but is that something that kind of came natural to you, jumping in front of camera and talking about like windsurfing tips, or did you have to kind of stumble through that and just learn it, and inexperience will create the professional at some point? I'm
still learning. Yeah. So it's something like, again, going back to what I said before, it's something where I'm not afraid to look like a beginner. So every video, actually, I'm trying something a little bit different kind of editing, different kind of subtitle, and trying to figure out, okay, what works, what doesn't work. And it's not about making a perfect video. It's just about getting something out there. So some of these were filmed on, expensive $20,000 cameras, and some of them were filmed on an iPhone. And it's like, all right, the point is just to get this content out there and see what sticks, see what works, see what people like, and then go from there.
That's really cool. All right, last question. When this is all over and everybody's healthy again, the world isn't sick, are you going to go back to hugs and handshakes, or are you going to keep your distance?
That is a good question. I don't know. I have a feeling that we're going to have some pretty big changes in how we deal with each other as a society. Like, this is obviously having a huge effect on the economy, and so I think that we've got to. I think that businesses are going to open sooner than what people realize, or what people think, or sooner than what the worst predictions are. But that will come with a lot of changes to how we interact in public. I think that we're all going to be wearing masks. We're not going to be shaking hands. And that's going to be a necessity. Having those social changes is going to be a necessity to get the economy back and running, which, who knows what that world look like? Who knows what that world will look like?
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't answer that right now. I mean, fist pound all day. We'll be coming out with some weird. I think Yo-Yo Guns is going to come back. Gun hands or whatever. So
hey, the
cool,
shaka.
No shaka all the time. No shaka, no germs, man. Shaka, no germs. It's easy. That's cool, bro. Well, hey, let everybody know where they can find you. Maybe some of the companies you're repping, and we'll get out of here.
Yeah, so you can find me. The best way to interact with me is on Instagram. I'm Graham Ezzy, so that's GRAHAMEZZY on Instagram. And then the sale company that I work with is Ezzy Sales, which is just Ezzy.com. And then the world tour is PWAworldtour.com. And that's the bulk of what I'm doing and where I exist online.
And he'll be stuck in Hawaii until we let you guys know anything different. So
yeah, exactly.
Graham, dude, awesome time talking to you. I really appreciate it. I thought your insight from a young pro to where you are now, still competing as a pro, is awesome. And I know the best is yet to come. You're still super young, and we're going to do this interview again another time in person in Hawaii or Germany. And we're going to talk about some more stuff because I still have so many more questions. But hey, dude, I appreciate you being on the show. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you, man. I really appreciate the call, and I'm totally looking forward to the next time we sit down together.
Heck yeah. All right, guys, if you are into windsurfing or anything water sports, get over there and check out Graham's Instagram. Like you say, he's got the free coaching on there right now. Learn something new while you guys are sitting inside. Jump on the water if you can. Wishing everybody a very safe time and quick recovery, hopefully, as this passes. But we're going to get through this. So until next time, this is Chase with Chasing Independence from Podiums for Prosperity, and I'll catch you all on the flip side. Well, there you have it. End of another episode. Thanks everybody for sticking around if you made it through. And a big shout out to Graham for taking time out of his family and busy windsurfing schedule to sit down with us today and kind of just tell us about his time in action sports and how his career has shaped his life. I think one of my favorite takeaways from this episode was kind of listening to Graham explain how everything he's done throughout his life to this point have been through passion and a desire to learn. The whole reason, why he traveled across the Pacific, across the United States to attend one of the top Ivy League schools in the country was because he wanted to. He had a sense of, I need to learn, I want to learn this, I want to do this. And he didn't let it hinder his action sports career, yet he continued to compete through college at an Ivy League school. I just thought that was really impressive. On top of that, being involved as he is on such a high level still in the windsurfing industry, being a board member for the PWA Tour, World Tour, and actually having input and insight on how the future of the organization and the sport will look. It just shows that in life, if you follow your passion and do things that you truly love to do, you can't go wrong. And with that being said, I'll be back in the office this week, hunting down awesome new guests for the show. In addition, I'll be creating a couple mini-sodes where I'll go out and actually interview people who may or may not be professional athletes or CEOs, but at some scale they have like experience in action sports. But these people are more professionals in things like e-commerce, online marketing, video production, things that can really help small businesses increase their impact and reach online. For my first mini-sode series, I'll be bringing in Scott Kramer, who is a lifelong skier, skateboarder, surfer, but his actual professional career, he works for Common Thread Collective and runs their New York City office. They specialize in media buying, online advertising, and getting recognitions for big brands all over the internet. I'm excited to bring Scott in, especially during this coronavirus and pandemic time, because he's going to talk about what he's doing with a lot of his major brands online to help them increase their exposure while cutting their ad spend. So something that, during this pandemic is important. People got to continue marketing. They got to continue getting their businesses out there. So hopefully Scott will have some quick tips and easy things for those of you who actually are in business or entrepreneurs, and especially those of you who are doing anything online, or if you have an e-commerce business, definitely want to tune in for that one. So thank you so much for coming in for this episode of Chasing Independence. Until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.